The spit hit the black royal guard's face with a sickening splat, the racist tourist's saliva dripping down his pristine scarlet uniform. For 23 seconds, he stood motionless, exactly what the blonde woman expected from someone she saw as beneath her. But what happened next wasn't the guard's reaction that shocked everyone. It was the crowd's response that changed everything, proving that sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe to see how one moment of racism backfired in the most beautiful way possible. Sergeant William Hayes had faced worse than saliva during his 8 years with the King's Guard. At 31, his imposing 6'4" frame and disciplined bearing commanded respect at Buckingham Palace's main entrance, where he stood watch over one of Britain's most visited landmarks. But beneath his ceremonial scarlet tunic and towering bearskin cap lay something tourists rarely considered: a decorated combat veteran with 2 tours in Afghanistan and a military cross for extraordinary courage under fire. The July morning had started routinely. Hayes assumed his position at 8 a.m. sharp, rifle at the ready, eyes fixed forward in the 1,000-yard stare that had become second nature. The growing crowd of international visitors created the usual buzz of excitement and camera clicks, families posing for photos and children pointing in wonder at the iconic guards. Among the sea of tourists, Bethany Mackenzie stood out like a predator surveying prey. The 28-year-old blonde from Dallas, Texas, carried herself with the unmistakable arrogance of inherited wealth. Her designer outfit, a $3,000 Chanel blazer over perfectly fitted jeans and Louboutin heels, screamed privilege. Her oversized Hermes bag and diamond-encrusted watch completed the picture of someone accustomed to getting her way through money and manipulation. Bethany had arrived in London as part of a month-long European tour, her social media accounts documenting a lifestyle of luxury hotels, exclusive restaurants, and expensive shopping sprees. But beneath the glamorous facade lurked something uglier, a deep-seated racism that manifested whenever she encountered people she deemed inferior. The trouble began when Bethany's photographer, hired to capture her authentic London experience, suggested shots with the Royal Guards. "Make sure you get me with the cute ones," she instructed, scanning the guards with calculating eyes. When her gaze landed on Sergeant Hayes, her expression soured. "Not that one," she said dismissively, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "I'm not posing with that." Her photographer, a nervous British freelancer named Marcus, shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, perhaps we could—" I said no. Bethany's tone turned sharp. "Don't these people have any white guards? This is supposed to be a proper British experience." Several nearby tourists exchanged glances, their conversations quieting as they overheard her comments. An elderly British couple moved closer to their grandchildren, the grandfather's jaw tightening with visible disapproval. A young German tourist lowered her camera, no longer interested in photographing the scene. Sergeant Hayes heard every word. His peripheral vision, trained through combat deployments where situational awareness meant survival, caught the hostile energy building around Bethany's group. But his discipline held firm. He'd endured worse provocations than ignorant commentary from entitled tourists. Bethany, frustrated by her photographer's reluctance to exclude Hayes from potential shots, decided to take matters into her own hands. She approached Hayes' position with deliberate aggression, her designer heels clicking against the palace stones like a countdown to confrontation. "Excuse me," she called out, positioning herself directly in front of Hayes. "I'm trying to take proper photos here. Can't you move somewhere else?" Hayes maintained his forward gaze, giving no indication he'd heard her. This response only fueled Bethany's indignation. "I'm talking to you," she continued, her voice rising. "Don't ignore me when I'm speaking. I know you people can hear." The crowd around them had grown larger, drawn by the escalating tension. Marcus, the photographer, had stopped taking pictures entirely, sensing the situation spiraling beyond professional boundaries. Other tourists began pulling out phones, no longer interested in posed shots, but in documenting what appeared to be brewing conflict. "Ma'am, please step back," said James Crawford, a middle-aged teacher from Manchester who'd been visiting with his family. "The guards are performing their duty." Bethany whirled on him with practiced disdain. "Mind your own business. I'm American, and I have every right to be here, unlike some people who probably don't even belong in this country." The racist undertone was unmistakable. Crawford's wife instinctively moved their 2 young children behind her, while Crawford himself stepped forward. "That's completely out of line." "Is it?" Bethany's voice dripped with false innocence. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. This is supposed to be a traditional British experience, not some diversity showcase." The crowd's energy shifted palpably. What had been curious observation became focused attention, with dozens of people now watching and recording. Among them stood Dr. Patricia Williams, a 45-year-old Jamaican-British physician visiting with her teenage daughter, her face darkening with recognition of familiar hatred. Beside her, Ahmed Hassan, a Syrian refugee who'd found sanctuary in London 5 years earlier, felt his stomach tighten with the memory of persecution. Nearby, an elderly Holocaust survivor named Ruth Goldman clutched her husband's arm, her eyes reflecting the pain of witnessing hatred that echoed across generations. But Bethany was just getting started. "You know what your problem is?" She addressed Hayes directly, stepping even closer. "You think you're entitled to respect just because you're wearing that costume. But we both know what you really are underneath all that red fabric." Sergeant Hayes' jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his gaze remained fixed forward. His hands, scarred from combat operations where he'd saved the lives of soldiers from every background, remained steady on his rifle. The insult stung, but his military discipline held firm. That's when Bethany made the decision that would define the next 10 minutes of her life. "Since you won't acknowledge your betters," she said, gathering saliva in her mouth, "maybe this will get your attention." The spit flew from her mouth in a deliberate arc, striking Hayes squarely on the left cheek. The thick, viscous glob slid down his dark skin and dripped onto his scarlet tunic, leaving a visible stain on the pristine uniform. For exactly 23 seconds, the world seemed frozen. Hayes stood motionless, the saliva continuing its slow descent down his face. His breathing remained controlled, his posture unchanged, his eyes still fixed forward with military precision. This was exactly what Bethany had expected, submission disguised as duty. But she had gravely miscalculated the audience. The crowd's reaction began with gasps of horror, followed by a moment of stunned silence. Then, something extraordinary happened. Dr. Williams was the first to move. She stepped forward, pulling a pristine white handkerchief from her purse. "Sir," she said firmly, approaching Hayes with respectful determination. "With your permission." Hayes gave the slightest nod, barely perceptible, but enough. Dr. Williams gently wiped the spit from his face, her movements careful and dignified. "You don't deserve this," she said quietly. "No one does." That single act of kindness triggered an avalanche of human decency. Ahmed Hassan moved next, positioning himself between Bethany and Hayes. "Ma'am, what you did is unacceptable," he said in accented but clear English. "This man serves his country with honor." Ruth Goldman shuffled forward despite her age, her voice carrying the weight of lived experience. "I've seen this hatred before, child. It never ends well for those who spread it." James Crawford, the teacher from Manchester, addressed his children loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is what we don't do, kids. We don't judge people by their color. We respect those who serve others." One by one, tourists from around the world began forming a protective semicircle around Hayes. A Japanese family bowed respectfully. A group of Australian backpackers stood at attention in solidarity. French tourists began applauding, slowly at first, then joined by others until the courtyard rang with appreciation. But the most powerful moment came from an unexpected source. 8-year-old Emma Crawford broke free from her parents and approached Hayes with the fearless innocence of childhood. She pulled a small Union Jack flag from her backpack, a souvenir from earlier in their London visit, and placed it gently at Hayes' feet. "Thank you for keeping us safe," she said in her clear child's voice that carried across the now silent courtyard. That broke something in the assembled crowd. The applause intensified, joined by cheers and calls of, "Well done," and "Thank you for your service." Phones that had been recording Bethany's racist attack now captured something beautiful. Dozens of strangers united in rejecting hatred and honoring service. Bethany, who had expected to humiliate Hayes, found herself surrounded by hostile faces. Her photographer had disappeared into the crowd, no longer willing to document her behavior. The protective circle around Hayes had effectively isolated her as the villain of the piece. "This is ridiculous," she protested, her privileged confidence finally cracking. "I didn't do anything illegal. It's just spit." "It's assault," said a clear voice from the crowd. Detective Inspector Sarah Morrison, off duty but carrying her Metropolitan Police credentials, stepped forward. "And given the racial nature of your comments, it's also a hate crime." Bethany's face went pale beneath her expertly applied makeup. "You can't arrest me. I'm American. I have diplomatic immunity." "No, you don't," D.I. Morrison replied calmly. "And being American doesn't grant you the right to assault British service members." As Morrison called for backup, the crowd's attention returned to Hayes, who had maintained his position throughout the entire incident. The dignity with which he'd endured the attack and accepted the crowd's support had transformed him from a ceremonial figure into a symbol of grace under pressure. Palace security arrived within minutes, but the situation was already under control. The crowd had self-organized into witnesses, with multiple people offering their recorded footage as evidence. Bethany found herself facing not just legal consequences but social media infamy, as videos of her racist attack and the crowd's beautiful response began spreading across platforms. The immediate aftermath revealed the true cost of Bethany's hatred. Her social media accounts, once showcasing privileged lifestyle content, became flooded with condemnation. Brands she'd worked with as an influencer quickly distanced themselves. Her wealthy father, a Dallas real estate mogul, faced business boycotts as news of his daughter's behavior spread. But the more profound impact was the moment of unity that emerged from ugliness. Dr. Williams, who had wiped Hayes' face, found herself speaking with Ruth Goldman about their shared experiences of prejudice across generations. Ahmed Hassan exchanged contact information with James Crawford, leading to a friendship that would span years. The Japanese family, the Tanaka family, approached Hayes after his shift ended. Through broken English and translation apps, they conveyed their respect and invited him to visit Japan as their guest. Similar offers came from tourists representing a dozen countries, all moved by his dignity and their shared humanity. Emma Crawford's Union Jack flag was returned to her by palace staff, but she insisted it remain with Hayes. "He's the real guard," she told her parents. "He kept all of us safe today." The video footage, when it inevitably went viral, told a story that restored faith in humanity. While racism certainly existed, the response proved that good people still outnumbered the bad ones. The collective action of strangers becoming allies demonstrated that bystander apathy wasn't inevitable. Sometimes all it took was one person stepping forward to inspire others. Hayes himself became an unlikely symbol of dignity in the face of hatred. Interview requests poured in from international media, though he declined most, preferring to let his service speak for itself. When he did agree to speak with the BBC, his words were characteristically measured. "What happened that day wasn't about me," he said. "It was about all those people who chose to stand up when they saw something wrong. That's the Britain I serve, and that's the humanity I believe in." 3 months later, Dr. Williams organized a multicultural festival in London, bringing together communities from across the city. Hayes was invited as guest of honor, though he attended out of uniform, preferring to celebrate as a private citizen among the friends he'd made that day. Bethany Mackenzie faced legal consequences, including a hate crime conviction, deportation, and a permanent UK entry ban. Her attempted return to social media influence was met with sustained criticism, effectively ending her career as a lifestyle blogger. More significantly, the incident forced her family to confront their own prejudices, leading to difficult but necessary conversations about inherited racism. The lasting legacy of that July morning wasn't the hatred one person attempted to spread, but the love that hundreds of strangers chose to share. In an age of increasing division, the response to Bethany's racism proved that human decency could triumph over prejudice when people chose to act rather than merely observe. The handkerchief Dr. Williams used to wipe Hayes' face was later framed and displayed in her surgery, a reminder to her patients that dignity and respect transcend all boundaries. Ahmed Hassan kept a photo from that day on his desk, showing strangers of all backgrounds united in rejecting hatred. Most powerfully, Emma Crawford's simple act of placing the flag at Hayes' feet became a symbol of childhood innocence confronting adult prejudice. The image was used in anti-racism campaigns across Europe, proving that sometimes the most profound statements come from the purest hearts. Sergeant Hayes continues his service with the King's Guard, but the dynamics have changed. Tourists approach with greater respect, understanding that beneath the ceremonial uniform stands not just a soldier, but a symbol of dignity, triumphing over hatred. Children especially seek him out, inspired by the story of the day strangers became heroes. The spit that was meant to humiliate instead became the catalyst for one of the most beautiful demonstrations of human solidarity ever captured on camera. In trying to diminish one man's dignity, Bethany Mackenzie inadvertently revealed the infinite capacity for good that exists when people choose love over hatred, unity over division, and courage over silence. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with the simplest acts of kindness, proving that in the face of hatred, the only response that truly matters is love multiplied by action. What would you have done if you witnessed such an act of racism? Would you have stepped forward like Dr. Williams, or waited for someone else to act first? Let us know in the comments below, and if this story restored your faith in humanity, please like and subscribe for more stories that prove good people still change the world, one act of kindness at a time. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, because sometimes the most important lessons come from ordinary people doing extraordinary things.